Hi everybody, welcome to Jam Daddy Whiskey. I'm Dan, and in this video I'm going to be trying two highly anticipated bourbons. They are the brand new releases from one of the hottest newer distilleries around, Bardstown Bourbon Company. We're talking about the Bardstown Bourbon Origin Series, their bottled and bond wheated bourbon, and their Kentucky Straight Bourbon, which is a high rye bourbon. Both of these bottles are 6 years old, and both of them are important in that they mark the first releases from Bardstown Bourbon Company made entirely of their own distillate. Bardstown has been around for a few years now, but they did not want to release their own product until it got to an age that they thought would produce a respectable product. They'd wanted to do a bottled and bond, but they didn't want to just keep it at 4 years, and 6 years really was the goal for their own product. The distillate that's in both of these releases was barreled in fall of 2016, and this release came out in early 2023. I'm going to nose, taste, score, and grade these separately, and then give my take on which one I think is the better of the two releases and what might be better for you to grab too. Let's start with the lower proof, which is the Kentucky Straight Bourbon Origin Series, the white label here, which is the high rye bourbon. And the specific mash bill on this is 60% corn, 34% rye, and only 4% malted barley. From my own experience and from what I've heard, the most comparable product to this specific release, the Kentucky Straight Bourbon, the High Rye Origin Series release, the white label, is the Fusion Series that Bardstown Bourbon Company had been putting out before. With their Fusion Series, which was usually a blue label, Bardstown would make a fusion of their own distillate, which was younger than 6 years at the time, and source distillate that they got from other places and then blended together to get just right. Each fusion release was different, but it did still showcase Bardstown's own spirit, their own distillate that was used to make the blend. So it makes sense that now that we're looking at Bardstown's own distillate, they're 100% their own stuff, that it would taste a little bit reminiscent of fusion. And I got this bottle for about 48 bucks, not a bad deal at all, which is about the same as the fusion releases. I think they might have been a little bit more expensive. So some high hopes with this one that a really great bourbon company can make a really good dram for not that expensive. Let's see what we think. On the nose. So you get the rye. There's like a tangy sweetness on the nose too, which I think if I dissect it, it might be some youthful corn notes along with the oak, like a little bit of oak. Maybe a little bit of tannins or astringency. It almost gives it like a citrus scent to it as well. It's a nice nose, it's refreshing. It's not particularly oaky, although I do think the oak has some influence on it. And you definitely get more of the rye spice, the influence from the rye, than you do any like vanilla or anything like that from the oak. And the corn sweetness that's there, yeah, it's maybe a little bit on the sawdusty or like grassy side, maybe just a touch, but not too much. Just makes it like a really zesty, kind of refreshing nose. On the palate. So on the palate, I get some vanilla. I get some of that orange zestiness note, like a citrus. I think definitely going toward orange. And then you get some of that rye spice on the back palate, maybe a little touch of oak. And the finish kind of drops into almost like a creamsicle kind of flavor, like you get that vanilla and a little bit of the orange again. Now, when I hear orange, when someone tastes a bourbon, my mind often goes to Dickel. And I'm not an anti-George Dickel person. Like I do like that citrus mineral note that comes with a lot of George Dickel products, as long as it's not too overpowering. This orange note in here, it's not overpowering, it is really soft, and it isn't that same sort of George Dickel mineral note. It's a different sort of citrus than that. Definitely on the orange side though, in my opinion. And now it does come out more on the nose after taking a sip too. That rye spice, the orange. Some of that vanilla is coming through a little bit more now too. Second sip. Yeah, that's really good. It's almost like cream soda with like an orange note added to it. That's might be the best comparison I could really make on this one. Yeah, and more of that oak's coming through on the nose too. Less so on the palate. And the finish on this, I mean, this isn't a super viscous dram. I mean, I think this is what, 94, 96 proof? 96 proof. And it drinks really well. It's not crazy mouth coating. The finish, you know, it is longer than I would have expected for how, not thin, but how unviscous it is. Maybe like a medium, short to medium finish, something like that, but I do still have sweetness that lingers, which is great. This is an easy drinker. It tastes really good. It's not gonna blow your socks off or wow you. It's not terribly complex, but it's also not one-dimensional. There are a few different things going on here. There's a little bit of development on the palate, a lot of unity between what you pick up on the nose and what I get on the palate too. The score for Bardstown Bourbon Company's Origin Series Kentucky Straight Bourbon, the white label 96 proof high rye bourbon, is a 7.5. I think it's a really good bourbon. There's nothing in here that's absolutely blowing my socks off, but it's really quality, it's enjoyable, it's easy to drink. I can't really fault it in any way that's obvious to me. And on to the wheated companion. This is Bardstown Bourbon Company Origin Series Bottled and Bond Bourbon. And again, this is the wheated bourbon. It's 68% corn, so a little more corn, only 20% wheat, less than the rye that was in the other one, and then 12% malted barley. So a little bit more corn, more malted barley, a little bit less wheat as compared to the rye. This one is bottled and bond, so it is 100 proof and 6 years old, just like the other one. The price on this one is a little bit more expensive than the other Origin series, the high rye one. I believe it's around like 55 bucks, something like that is about what I paid for it. So not too bad, less than 10 bucks more expensive, but still more expensive. On the nose. Okay, so definitely smells like a wheater, but the wheat doesn't overpower the nose on this one. It's just there. It adds like this, I don't know, like silky kind of velvetiness to the nose, if that makes any sense whatsoever. I always find that wheaters tend to be either like softer on the nose than rye bourbons, or you know, they have like a cherry note sometimes. It usually goes in one of those two directions for me. And this one is definitely more on the side of like softer notes. Almost like a bit chocolatey. I'm not picking up on any kind of like grassy notes or hay or obvious youth or anything like that. And oddly enough, even though there's more corn in this one, I'm not picking up on any really obvious corn notes. I think the wheat is either blending with that pretty well or it's kind of masking it. Smells good. Smells like this could be a really elegant, easy to drink, almost rich. Like it smells like it's going to be rich or viscous, but let's find out. So that is good. That is really sweet. Almost like a milk chocolatey sweetness up front. And then it goes into more of like a bubblegummy, this is gonna sound weird, but like a bubblegummy kind of like hay weedy sweetness on the back. Like it becomes more stereotypically weedy. And then the finish, yeah, I mean, there is like a stronger cereal note to that than you get in the front palate or the mid palate as well. The viscosity on this one though, it smelled really rich. It's not very viscous at all. You know, it might be a little bit thin actually. And going back to the nose after taking that first sip, I am getting some more fruity sort of sense. It's almost like a touch of like some kind of like tropical fruit. Like if you had one of those, I don't know what it would even be, but you know, the different candy packs where they have like a sort of basic assortment of like fruits, and then they have, our tropical version like Skittles or something like that. It's almost like if you, you know, had a little bit from one pack and a little bit from another, where there's like some basic sort of fruits and then some more tropical stuff kind of blended together. Just a touch of that on here. But it really is soft and almost like, it's like it's rounded with like a bubblegummy or like a cotton candy kind of note on the nose and the palate actually. Second sip. Yeah, still pretty thin, still get that milk chocolatey note up front, in the front palate. Maybe a tiny bit of like some kind of spiciness, or maybe the ethanol just hit the wrong part of my palate, but it's really a silky smooth drink, but without being too viscous, which maybe that contradicts itself. It tastes really good. It's not complex at all though. It's just sweet. The sweetness maybe changes a little bit on the palate. The nose is maybe not quite as in unity with the palate as the other Origin Series drink was, because I'm not getting as much of that fruitiness on the palate as I thought I was initially, and definitely not as much as I was getting on the nose, but it is very good. Yeah, and with another sip, more of the same. So nothing new there. I think my opinion on this one is pretty cemented. I do like it. It's incredibly easy to drink. This isn't really a thinker bourbon. It's just if you want a good wheated bourbon, I think this is gonna be a good option for you. Let's score it though. The Bardstown Bourbon Company Origin Series Bottled in Bond, the wheated bourbon, the black label, gets a score from me of 7.4. Just under the high rye bourbon. I think in the right environment, this could be the bourbon that you gravitate to between these two, the wheated one that is, just because it is so easy to drink. Like, this is definitely the more crushable of the two, although they both kind of are, just because it's sweet and it is sort of one-dimensional. Like, if you just want a sweet, easy to drink bourbon that isn't super cheap, super youthful, because I don't pick up on a lot of youth on this one at all, this is a really great option. So if you're like watching a movie, if you're having friends over, you want to give them a nicer bourbon without breaking the bank or giving something super rare, especially if they like Makers or something like that. I think this is definitely a step up from Makers, and definitely from Larceny. It really, all the like bottom shelf sort of wheaters, this is better than that. Does it reach the level of like a Weller 107? I don't think so. I don't know. I kind of wish it was a little bit higher proof, honestly, because it is a little bit thin. I wish there was some more complexity there, and I think if it wasn't watered down as much, I would assume there'd be a little bit more going on the palate, but who knows? I mean, Bardstown Bourbon Company certainly knows what they're doing, so maybe this was the perfect proof for it. I don't know. But let's grade these releases. These have been so highly anticipated. They're filling a space that should be ongoing for Bardstown Bourbon Company from here on out. Like, these are going to be their core range, their base product. It's here to stay. And I think people get so caught up with Bardstown's collaborative releases where they finish some crazy bourbon in some crazy cask that they get from some beer company, some wine company, brandy company, whatever. And the Discovery series where they get these really high-end blends and they make something absolutely fantastic, that they're thinking that Bardstown is going to make something that's going to blow their minds away for like $50. And this doesn't do that. I mean, neither of these are going to blow your mind in any way. But they're both really good quality bourbons, and they're really good for the price. Like, both of these are around $50. Yeah, that's more expensive than like a Makers or a Larceny. Yeah, it's more expensive than like a Knob Creek or a Buffalo Trace or something like that, but they're really good. They taste different. There is a unique profile to both of these that you can't just find another bourbon on the shelf to replace this, at least not easily, to be like a one-for-one. And these are not clones of existing bottom shelf, middle shelf bourbons that you're already familiar with. At least they don't seem that way to me at all. And I really appreciate that. They should be available. They're easy enough to find. They're kind of high in demand right now, but things should level off once that initial demand gets over with and people have a chance to taste these, more get out there. So all things considered, I do think both of these are going to get one grade for me since I scored them about the same. I think they're both pretty good. I give both of these releases an A-. They're really good. None of them are like completely wowing me in any way. I like them for the price. I think if they were like $45 or $40 for these, it'd be an A+ all day for sure. Or if they were a little bit more complex, had a little bit more going on, then that would bump it up probably to like an A or something like that. But that's not an insult at all. These are wonderful bourbons. They're not supposed to be the most complex thing you've ever tasted. They're not supposed to be, you know, a bargain bin sort of bourbon. I think they're priced really well. I think they taste really great. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Bardstown Bourbon Company can do next. And what should be hitting store shelves anytime now, because we're in the month of their release, and I think it actually did release a little bit through some websites, is their core range rye. They're making a Bardstown Origin Series rye as well. If you've tried these, I'm really interested in hearing what you think, especially if you think these have been overhyped, if you think they lived up to the hype, if you differ in any way with the opinion that I shared with you today. I'm especially interested in if you pick up more complexity to these than I did, because I've had them for a bit now, I've been searching for it, and I really enjoy them, but I just don't get a whole lot of complexity from them. And now, let's make Bardstown Origin Series 4 grain. That's pretty good on the nose. Okay, a little more complexity there. And to taste. It's like the wheated portion of this is kind of smoothing out the edges of the rock. It's good. I don't know if I like it better than either one of those though. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you've gotten to purchase either or both of these, I hope you enjoyed your bottle. Let us know. And until next time, cheers.